Hey crew, it's Presley. Today's flip note is going to be based on the three Chinese philosophies. A lot of this I think you can probably get the gist of already, but I'm just trying to make sure we all have kind of a clear picture before we move on. So this flip lesson will cover these slides without stopping. So I'm hoping in about 8 minutes to cover all three philosophies. So you will probably need to pause this as you fill out your notes. Okay, so the end of the Shang brought about the start of the Zhou dynasty. Even though it's spelled ZH, it sounds like a J. The Zhou dynasty. The Zhou dynasty is going to start this concept called mandate of heaven to kind of legitimize their own power. The mandate of heaven is kind of this idea that the gods have granted you the right to rule. And as long as you are governing people well, the gods will continue to back you. But if you're starting to govern poorly, heaven will send signs that they're not happy with you by, famine or plagues or floods, tornadoes, something like that, natural disasters. And that is a signal that you're in trouble with the gods and others might overthrow you. So this cycle, this mandate of heaven, is going to be the justification for a lot of overthrows of government and kind of to legitimize the new ruler. So during this time in Chinese history, they're using feudalism, where kings would grant tracts of land in exchange for these landowners providing soldiers and protection. So you are, as a peasant, you give up your land to this guy who owns a local castle, and when the bad guys come over the hill, you can go hide in the castle and he will protect you. Okay, with me so far? So during the later years of the Zhou dynasty, we have what's called the Warring States period, where things are chaotic. There's no, it's a like kind of warlord type scenario where there's constant warfare and people just want to figure out, how do we find peace again? How do we create order? And this is what creates kind of those three ideas of how we get there: Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism. So as you guys already know, Confucianism is started by Confucius or Confucius. And he's really worried about, he lives about the time of the Romans, about 500 BCE. He's born in the small state in eastern China, and he experienced firsthand that kind of disorder and turmoil that erupted when lords are constantly fighting for power. As a kid, his own state was invaded lots of times. So he deeply respected Chinese traditions, a real reverence for ancestors, and saw that honor should be given to scholars. So education is going to be very important to the Confucius. He knew that society had to change in order for peace and order to come about. So he wanted rulers to govern wisely. He needed men of good character to govern honestly and fairly. It's all about those 5 basic relationships: father-son, husband-wife, ruler-subject, older brother to younger brother, friend to friend. You don't need to know all of them, but having a working idea to kind of recognize them when you see them is kind of helpful. So Confucianism is this focus on honesty and fairness. It's actually Confucius who comes up with this phrase, a gentleman, and we use that to describe somebody who is honest and fair and fulfills their role. And we still kind of use that term in that way today. So the biggest influence of Confucianism happens with the Han Dynasty, which is going to be the second dynasty of China after the Qin. And I know it's like, well, you haven't talked about the Qin yet. Well, I'll talk about the Qin when we get to legalism. But the practical effects of Confucianism when it comes to the Han Dynasty is they start to hire people based on their ability to do the job, not just because, they're some famous dude's son. Like, they try to get people into jobs because they're educated and they know what to do with the job. In order to qualify for a job, you were expected to know many of the Chinese classical books in detail. You had to know the proper behaviors, and you had to take exams. And these exams were called the civil service exams, and if you passed them, were called a civil servant. And traditionally, these are the sons of nobles because, well, poor people can't afford the books or the tutors to study for years to be prepared. So as much as it was supposed to kind of equalize things, it didn't really work out that way. But it definitely does push for a value of respect for elders and a love of scholarship. This really gets kind of woven into society. A real value for education, and definitely less crime because of the expectation of fulfilling your role. It doesn't mean that there is no crime, just that there's less. Taoism is founded by Lao Tse, sometimes it's pronounced Lao Tzu, and it really kind of pushes this simple and natural way of living. It's about finding harmony with nature, or some people say, you know, harmony with the universe, Wu Wei. Really, the advice Lao Tse offers is that you should live simply. And have you ever heard the phrase, it is what it is? And this kind of accepting what comes and kind of rolling with the punches? That's a very kind of Taoist thing to say. It is what it is. And the Taoists are really going to push for rulers that don't rule. So this doesn't really become a very popular way of ruling because rulers like power, and this doesn't offer it. But it does encourage rulers to rule less harshly, and is probably one of the biggest influences in all of Asian history when it comes to art and poetry. And so you see a lot of Taoist reflections in that. Legalism is founded by Han Fanze. This is strict rules, harsh punishments. Han Fanze was a prince. How convenient that somebody who was going to be next in charge liked being in charge, right? So big surprise there. Their big influence is going to be on the Qin dynasty, or the first dynasty, and this dynasty is really going to follow these kind of legalist ideas. So the unification happens under Shi Huangdi, Qin Shi Huangdi. Qin is the family name, and then Shi Huangdi is his title and first name. He is the one who unifies the various smaller kingdoms using his superior warfare tactics. He is going to capture control of using iron weapons. He's a fond follower of legalists. He follows these strict rules with harsh punishments. And he also starts to use bureaucracy to end feudalism. He creates 36 districts and kind of has different governor-type people in charge. And he works at standardizing the culture. All of these things aren't necessarily a bad thing, but once he gets settled, things are going to get a little crazy. And we're going to stop here with the notes. I promised you would be less than 10 minutes, so we're going to stop it by less than 9. And so at this point, you can go ahead and put away your notes. If you're not quite done with the chart on the philosophies, please use the time to finish that. That'll be a signal to the sub that you guys are ready for the documentary. And it's on Shi Huangdi. And it'll pick up from his childhood up through his death and his influence after. And there's some cool things in there, particularly as you get towards his death, about his tomb and some other stuff. I don't want to give away too much. So I will see you Friday. And if you have questions, send me a message in Canvas. See y'all later.